On the night Ashford Hollow lost its children, the orphanage bell rang twice, though the rope had been cut that morning. Rain pressed against the black windows of Blackwood Orphanage, turning the world beyond the glass into a smear of lamplight and thorn. The halls smelled of soap and tallow. 21 narrow beds were made, boots lined pair by pair beneath them, hands folded in evening prayer. Matron Eliza Harrow walked the corridor with a candle cupped in her palm, counting softly as she passed each door. In the nursery, Alice Bridger, 8, lay awake and listened to the rain map patterns on the roof. She had learned to hear things other children missed. The mouse behind the wainscot, the way the woods sighed after a day of footsteps, the far church clock when the wind was right. Tonight she heard something else. 3 slow taps beneath the floor, as if knuckles were rapping on the underside of the boards. "Matron?" she whispered. But when she looked, Matron Harrow had already drifted past, her candle throwing a tired oval of light, her lips moving with a prayer she carried like a stone. Downstairs, the refectory tables still held the evening's bread heels and a pot of carrot soup congealing at the rim. A ledger lay open where Headmaster Vale had been tallying deliveries: coal, flour, lamp oil. His pen had splattered a dark blot beside the word oil, as if a hand had jolted his arm mid-stroke. Outside, beyond the iron fence in the yews, a lantern bobbed once between the trees. Then again, a slow, patient sway. "Leave it," Harrow told the porter when he came to the door with his key. "No one wanders up here in a storm." The porter nodded, though he stared longer than he should. The flame had the wrong color to it, too pale, almost blue, the way a bruise blooms under skin. At 11:30, the nursery door creaked open on its own. Alice sat up. A wet draft slid across the floor and lifted the thin hair at her temples. From the hall came a whisper she knew and did not know, a voice shaped like her mother's name in the mouth of a stranger. "Alice," it breathed. "Little bird." She swung her legs carefully over the side of the bed, mindful of the place where the floorboards sang. The other girls slept, or pretended to. Kitty Marsh watched through lashes and saw the same pale lantern glow limn Alice's nightgown, making milk of the cloth. She meant to speak, to catch Alice by the wrist, but the whisper brushed her ear too, the same voice but fitted to her own lost shape, and for a breath she forgot every hunger and bruise. Matron Harrow reached the stair that turned toward the ground floor and paused. The bell rope, cleanly severed in the belfry that morning because it had begun to fray, hung still as a dead snake. Yet the bell had rung. She felt the note of it in her teeth more than heard it, the way a prayer can be felt when faith is gone. In the refectory, the ledger's pages lifted though the air was still. The ink blot spread, blooming like a night-blooming flower until it took the shape of a small hand upon the paper. The handprint dried black. Harrow found Headmaster Vale standing in the doorway to the chapel, his face turned to the rafters, as if to see a thing that crouched upon them. "Do you smell it?" he asked lightly, as a man at a garden gate might remark upon lilac. "Wet earth, graves turned." She did. The rain had not carried it in. It rose from the stone itself. The lantern beyond the fence bobbed again, nearer now. The yews seemed to bend toward it, as if in greeting. "Bolt the door," Harrow said, "and wake the boy's master." The porter lifted the iron bar. The hinges complained. For a moment the door stood half open on the storm, and in that black wedge of night, Harrow saw the path glistening like a tongue, and the lantern standing at the foot of the steps, without any hand to hold it. Something moved behind the lantern. Not a man, not in the way a man is arranged. The porter pushed. The door came to with a thud that echoed through the old timbers. Somewhere above them, a hymn began very softly in thin, tired voices. Suffer the little children to come unto me, though no one had given the order to sing. Harrow climbed, candle trembling, and found the nursery beds emptying one by one. Not in panic, not like a flight. The children rose with the blank, obedient calm of those called by their Christian names in a roll, and walked barefoot into the corridor, where the shadows were deepest. Back to your beds, she said. Her voice broke on beds. Children! A few turned their heads. None met her eyes. Their attention was fixed just over her shoulder, at a height no adult could stand. She did not look to see. Headmaster Vale's shoes, which had been neatly side by the chapel door, stood now pointing away from each other as if he had turned in two directions at once. The ledger in the refectory flipped its last page. On the flyleaf, a fine, clear hand had written a single line that no one had taught. Count them again. At midnight the bell rang, its second, thin, impossible note. The candle went out between Harrow's fingers. She did not feel the burn. She felt only the sudden certainty that the building around her had been unfastened, that all its doors opened onto a place where rooms did not end. Alice, she said into the dark. From the stairwell below came the soft sound of many small feet going down and down, as if the stairs had been lengthened while no one watched. By morning the beds were made. The soup had skinned over like a pond in frost. The ledger was closed. 21 pairs of boots waited in their neat rows, their laces tucked. 6 staff coats hung on their pegs. The iron bar lay across the front door. No footprints, no broken lock, no children. The rain had washed the path clean. Only the ewes remembered, dropping black seeds that stained the stone. For weeks after, villagers passed the gate with eyes averted. Then they learned to look again. The orphanage kept its shape against the hill, and the bell rope hung unmended, and the windows filled with the sky by day and with nothing by night. Seasons salted the steps with moss. Names faded on parish lists. The ledger gathered dust. The lantern in the trees did not show itself again, until it did. 21 years later, a train whistle sounded below the hill, and a man with a satchel and a notebook stepped onto Ashford Hollow's small platform and lifted his head toward Blackwood's silhouette. Don't listen alone. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your story might just appear in our next tale. It was already past dusk when Daniel Hargrove's train pulled into the small, half-forgotten station of Ashford Hollow. The air here seemed older somehow, damp, heavy with the scent of peat and wood smoke, as though the village had been steeping in the same atmosphere for centuries. Daniel stepped down from the carriage, his satchel tugging at his shoulder. In it were 3 shirts, a fountain pen, and a leather-bound notebook filled with half-researched stories. He was a freelance journalist, though lately that meant more debts than pay, and his latest commission had led him to this place. The brief had been simple. Investigate the history of the abandoned Blackwood Orphanage. Submit a 5,000-word piece with photos. The fee wasn't generous, but there had been something in the tone of the editor's letter, something almost eager, and that had hooked him. The station master, a stooped man in a brown cap, watched Daniel from the doorway of his tiny office. "You'll be wanting the Hill Road then?" he asked without introduction. "Yes," Daniel said, startled that the man knew. "Blackwood Orphanage." The station master's mouth twitched, half a grimace, half a smirk. "It's still up there, sure enough. Folks here don't go near after dark." Daniel tried to laugh. "Local superstition?" The man didn't answer. He just pointed toward a narrow mud-slick road winding away into the trees. The climb was steeper than the map had suggested. Branches tangled overhead, weaving the dusk into something nearly black. Occasionally Daniel caught glimpses of the village below, its lamps glowing like coals in the fog. And once far ahead, the silhouette of the orphanage itself. From here it looked almost like a church, its bell tower jagged against the last light. Halfway up, the wind shifted. Daniel caught a faint smell, wet earth, like after digging a grave. By the time he reached the iron gates, night had settled. The gates stood slightly ajar, their hinges shrieking in the wind. Beyond them, the path was scattered with black yew seeds that popped softly under his boots. The building loomed, windows dark, its roof slick with rain. Somewhere inside, a door banged once, twice, as if greeting him. Daniel did not enter the orphanage immediately. Instead, he walked the perimeter, his boots sinking into the damp grass. The building was larger than he'd expected, 3 stories high, wings stretching to either side like broken arms. Many of the windows were boarded up, but a few remained open to the night. Black squares staring down at him. He took out his camera and snapped a few shots. The flash seemed to vanish into the gloom, as though the darkness swallowed it whole. At the far side of the building, he found a small garden, long overgrown. Iron swings sagged in the weeds, their chains rusted solid. In the center stood a stone bird bath, filled not with water, but with something thick and black. It smelled faintly metallic. The main doors were heavy oak, their varnish peeled away to raw, gray wood. One door hung slightly open, and as Daniel pushed it, the hinges groaned. Inside, the air was colder, much colder than outside. His breath fogged. The entrance hall stretched wide, its floor tiled in a checkerboard pattern of black and white. Dust lay thick on everything except a narrow path leading deeper into the building, as if someone or something had walked it recently. On the right, a grand staircase rose into darkness. On the left, double doors hung ajar, leading into what appeared to be the dining hall. Long tables sat in neat rows, as though awaiting children who would never come. Plates and cups still rested on the tables, some overturned, some upright, their surfaces spotted with mold. Daniel took a step toward them. That was when he heard it, a faint shuffle, like the drag of bare feet across stone. "Hello?" he called. His voice seemed too loud, bouncing back from the high ceiling. Silence. He told himself it was an animal, perhaps a fox or a raccoon that had wandered inside. Still, he found himself gripping his satchel strap tighter. Daniel moved through the dining hall, snapping more photos, his flashlight beam dancing over the warped wood and cracked plaster. In the far corner, a door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open to find the kitchen, its walls lined with shelves holding dust-caked jars, some labeled in neat handwriting, "Beef drippings 1932, honey 1931. On the counter sat a small tin box. He flipped the latch, and inside, neatly folded, were several letters. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. The first was dated October 12th, 1933. To the Reverend Mother, please, I beg of you, keep the children inside after dusk. Last night I saw him again near the tree line. The same tall man in the black coat, the same wide grin. The dogs will not go near him. You know this is not a matter for the police. Catherine Lowe. Daniel frowned. The handwriting was careful, but the last words seemed rushed, the ink darker, as though pressed harder into the paper. The second letter was even stranger. November 1st, 1933. Reverend Mother, the bell rang again last night. Twice. There are no storms this week. The children say they hear voices telling them to come outside. I have locked all windows, but the smallest one, Edwin, was found standing barefoot at the gates. He says she called him. Who is she? Daniel read the last letter twice. It was unsigned. He slid the letters back into the tin, but not before taking a few quick photos of them. In the hallway beyond the kitchen, he found a locked door with a small frosted window. Something about it drew him closer. He peered through the glass. Inside was a narrow, dimly lit room. Rows of wooden file cabinets lined the walls. The orphanage records, he thought. He tried the handle. Locked. But as he turned to leave, the light inside flickered once and went out. Daniel returned to the entrance hall, intending to step outside for air. But when he reached the front doors, he froze. They were shut. He was sure he had left one ajar. And on the inside of the door, scratched deep into the wood as though with nails, were 5 words. Don't let her ring it. The world tilted. Daniel felt as though the floor had been yanked out from under him. One moment, he was staring at the words carved in the orphanage door. The next, the dust and darkness were gone. He stood in the same hall, but it was alive. Warm lamplight bathed the checkerboard floor in gold. The air smelled of fresh bread and soap. Somewhere down the corridor, children's laughter rang out. But Daniel wasn't Daniel anymore. When he looked down, his hands were smaller, thinner. A plain brown dress brushed his ankles. His reflection in a wall mirror showed a pale, tired woman in her late 20s, hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name surfaced in his mind. Catherine Lowe. It was the evening of October 31st, 1933. Rain tapped lightly against the tall windows. In the dining hall, the children sat at long tables, eating pumpkin soup by the glow of lanterns. Catherine carried a tray of bread down the center aisle, offering seconds to the younger ones. She tried to smile, but her eyes kept drifting toward the high-arched windows at the far end of the room. Beyond them, the forest loomed, a dark, restless silhouette against the cloudy night. Somewhere out there, he was watching. The tall man. She first saw him weeks ago, standing just beyond the tree line, too far for his features to be clear, yet close enough for her to see the impossible. How his grin seemed wider than a human mouth could stretch. Now she felt him again. No footsteps, no movement, just presence. The Reverend Mother, seated at the head table, began to lead the children in prayer. Catherine's heart wasn't in it. Her gaze kept darting to the clock above the kitchen door. It was 5 minutes to 8. The bell tower above the orphanage hadn't been used in years. The rope had rotted. The stairs were unsafe. But Catherine knew the sound, and she knew it might ring again tonight. She was halfway to the kitchen when it happened. A single chime. Not loud, not harsh, but wrong, as if the sound came from inside her skull rather than the tower. Every child froze, spoons halfway to their mouths. The Reverend Mother's prayer faltered. Then came the whispering. It slithered through the air, weaving between the tables, curling into every ear. Catherine couldn't make out the words, but the children could. She saw it in their faces, eyes widening, lips parting in wonder. Several stood up. One boy dropped his spoon and began walking toward the door, bare feet silent on the tile. Catherine lunged, grabbing his shoulders. "Edwin, sit down!" He looked up at her with glassy eyes. "She's calling me," he said simply. A second chime rang out, louder. The whispers swelled. This time Catherine could hear the words. "Come to me." She screamed for the Reverend Mother to lock the doors. But the children were already moving, some climbing over tables, others slipping under them. Their small hands reached for the door handles. The Reverend Mother shouted prayers, her voice shaking. The lanterns flickered violently. Outside the windows, the forest seemed to lean closer. And just at the edge of the lamplight, Catherine saw him, tall, motionless, grinning. The third chime never came. Instead, the doors burst open on their own. And the children, one by one, they walked into the night. Daniel gasped, back in his own body, back in the present. The hall was empty again. Dust, silence, cold. But somewhere above him, faint and distant, he heard it. One single bell chime. The chime faded, leaving Daniel's ears ringing. He tilted his head toward the ceiling, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the soft creak of the building settling in the wind. But it had come from above. He found the narrow stairwell at the far end of the corridor. Its door was swollen with damp, the wood flaking under his fingers. When he pulled it open, a smell of mildew and rot poured out, thick and choking. The stairs spiraled upward into darkness. Daniel's flashlight beam cut a narrow cone through the dust. Each step groaned under his weight, the sound echoing in the hollow shaft. Somewhere below, a floorboard creaked. He froze, turning the light back down the way he'd come. Nothing but shadows and the slow drift of dust motes. He forced himself higher. Halfway up, the air grew colder. His breath clouded in front of him. He shone the light on the wall. Names scratched into the plaster. Dozens of them overlapping, some barely legible. Most were children's names. At the very top of the wall, just beneath the ceiling, one word stood alone. Stay. The stairs ended at a warped wooden door with a rusted iron latch. Daniel hesitated, palm hovering over it. From the other side came a faint tap. 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 Not a bell this time, like fingers on glass. He lifted the latch. The door swung inward, revealing the bell tower, a skeletal frame of beams and broken boards. Moonlight spilled in through missing roof panels, painting pale stripes across the floor. The bell itself hung cracked and blackened, its rope frayed to a single strand. And in the far corner, a mirror. It was out of place, too tall, too clean for this ruin. Its silver frame gleamed in the moonlight. The glass reflected the tower and him. Except it wasn't him. The figure in the mirror was taller, too tall. Its grin split its face from ear to ear, teeth long and jagged. Daniel staggered back. The figure in the glass didn't move with him. It stepped forward. The tapping grew louder. It was coming from inside the mirror. The glass rippled like water, and the figure reached through. Daniel stumbled backward as the arm pushed through the surface of the mirror. It wasn't flesh, more like wet, blackened wood, with nails that curved like rusted hooks. The fingers groped for him blindly, But the moment the tips grazed his jacket, the air in the tower shifted. The smell of mildew was gone. The moonlight vanished. The bell was whole again, and children's laughter rang in the air. Daniel turned in a slow circle. The bell tower wasn't a ruin anymore. It was pristine, lit by soft candlelight. A dozen small beds lined the walls, each neatly made. The mirror was gone, but the room wasn't empty. A girl stood near the center, barefoot, her nightdress white as paper. She was maybe 8 years old, hair falling in tangled braids over her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. Daniel's mouth was dry. Where is here?" The girl didn't answer. She lifted her arm and pointed toward the stairs. Footsteps echoed from below. Slow, heavy, the girl's expression twisted, not in fear, but in pity. "He's coming." Daniel bolted for the stairs. As he descended, the candles flickered and died. The wooden steps beneath his feet softened, sagging as if rotting in an instant. Halfway down, he caught sight of something in the darkness below. Tall, too tall, shoulders brushing the walls. Its head tilted upward, and he saw the grin, the same one from the mirror. He turned, scrambling up instead, heart pounding. But the stairwell was changing again, wood giving way to cold, black stone, and narrow slits of windows showing a sky streaked with red. Somewhere deep below, a bell tolled once, and the air filled with screams. When Daniel burst into the tower room again, it was night, ruined, moonlit, just as before. The mirror was back, but cracked now, hairline fractures spidering out from the center. And inside it, he didn't see himself anymore. He saw a dozen children pressed against the glass from the other side, their faces pale, their mouths moving in frantic, soundless pleas. Behind them, the tall figure waited. The glass began to bulge outward. Daniel ran, not for the stairs, but for the trap door in the corner he hadn't noticed before. It led down into pitch black, the ladder swaying under his weight. The smell hit him immediately, sweet rot, damp earth. His flashlight flickered to life just long enough to show him the floor. He was standing in a room lined with small wooden coffins. A whisper drifted through the dark, brushing the back of his neck. "They never left." The ladder behind him snapped. Something in the dark moved. The next morning, when the caretaker unlocked the gates, the building was silent. Daniel's car was still outside, keys on the seat. Inside, the tower stood empty, except for the mirror, and in the corner of the glass, a new face.